You open your phone. Not for anything specific, just to check. Maybe there is an Instagram post about how often couples should text. Maybe there is a video about what it means when someone goes quiet for a day. Maybe there is a comment thread buried under a post about relationships where someone describes something that sounds exactly like what you are going through. And you read it. And then you read another. And then, before you realize it, 40 minutes have passed, and you are not sure if you feel better or worse, but you feel more informed. Or at least, that is what you tell yourself. Something is happening inside modern relationships that is difficult to name, not because it is rare, because it is so common it has started to feel normal. You are in a relationship or getting to know someone, and something small happens. A shift in tone, a shorter reply, a night where things feel a little off. And instead of sitting with the uncertainty long enough to understand it, the first impulse is to open a tab, to search, to ask, or to wait for the algorithm to give you the answer. What does it mean when he goes silent? Is she pulling away? Why do I feel so insecure in a relationship that should make me feel safe? Am I too needy? Or is he emotionally unavailable? How should a relationship be? And the internet answers, immediately, generously. With more certainty than anyone who does not know you, your relationship, or your history should ever have. That certainty is the first problem, but it is not the only one. Here is what is actually happening beneath the search bar. When uncertainty appears inside a relationship, the nervous system does not wait for the mind to evaluate it. It moves first. It reaches for something, anything, that might reduce the feeling of not knowing. And in the modern world, that something is almost always a screen. This is not weakness. This is not immaturity. This is the nervous system doing what nervous systems were built to do. Seek a source of safety when safety feels unstable. But here is where the pattern becomes costly. The internet does not know you. It does not know your relationship. It does not know the specific history between you and this person. The way they went quiet after a difficult week at work. The way you grew up in a house where silence always meant danger. The way your body learned early that uncertainty and threat were the same thing. The internet only knows categories, and categories are not people. Attachment theory, one of the most influential ideas in psychology, begins with a deceptively simple observation. Human beings are wired for closeness. John Bowlby, the psychologist whose work shaped our understanding of how people attach, described the attachment system as a biological drive, not merely an emotional preference. Closeness, in the oldest part of the human body, has always meant safety. Distance has always meant threat. And when the attachment system is activated, when a relationship feels uncertain, inconsistent, or unclear, the body does not experience that as an intellectual question. It experiences it as a warning. Mary Ainsworth, building on Bowlby's ideas, observed that the way a child experiences early closeness shapes an internal working model of what relationships can be trusted to provide. If closeness was reliable, the body learns to rest inside connection. If closeness was inconsistent, the body learns to monitor it constantly. For most people, that internal model does not disappear when they grow up. Changing that is only possible with therapy, or by living a secure, intimate, and deep relationship with someone who provides secure attachment. So most of the time, it moves with them. It follows them into adult relationships, into first dates, into the moment a partner takes a little longer to reply than usual. And when the monitoring begins, when the scanning starts, the modern world offers something the body cannot resist: the illusion of an answer, a Reddit thread, a psychology account, a video essay about attachment styles with 3 million views. The body reaches for it like a hand reaching for a light switch in the dark. And this is where things become quietly dangerous, not because the information is always wrong. Sometimes the information is accurate. Sometimes a video about anxious attachment does name something real. But the problem is not only the accuracy of the information. The problem is what the information does to the relationship, and how much information you consume. Once you have a category, you use it. Once you have read that a person who goes quiet is probably avoidant, you start watching for evidence. Once you have watched a video about red flags, you start looking for red flags. Once you have read that emotional unavailability is a pattern, you start measuring every moment of distance against that pattern. And the person in front of you, the real person, the complicated and imperfect and specific person who is not a case study, begins to disappear inside the category you have placed them in. This is what some psychologists call a self-fulfilling dynamic. The belief shapes the behavior. The behavior confirms the belief. You become convinced your partner is emotionally distant. You begin responding to them as if they are emotionally distant. They feel the shift in you, the guardedness, the testing, the subtle withdrawal, and they pull back, not because they were always going to, but because the relationship changed before you noticed you had changed it. The internet did not cause the problem, but it gave the anxiety a language. And a language once given to a fear makes the fear feel like a fact. Carl Rogers, the psychologist who spent decades thinking about what it means to feel truly heard, wrote about something he called conditions of worth. These are the invisible rules that a person carries about when they are allowed to feel valuable, lovable, and enough. I am lovable when I am calm. I am lovable when I do not ask for too much. I am lovable when I understand exactly what is happening and respond correctly. And modern relationship culture, with its endless content about how to communicate, how to set boundaries, how to recognize avoidance, how to know if someone is genuinely interested, feeds those conditions of worth in a very specific way. It suggests that there is a correct way to be in a relationship, a correct way to respond, a correct level of need, a correct threshold for staying or leaving. And if you do not know that correct way, if you feel uncertain, confused, or emotionally reactive, then something is wrong with you. The message underneath 1,000 relationship posts is always the same. You should know better. You should want less. You should have figured this out by now. And so people search, not just for answers about their partner, but for permission to feel what they already feel, for reassurance that they are doing it right, for evidence that they are not the problem. But permission, real permission, is not something the internet can give. And the search for it can become another way of abandoning yourself to someone else's standard. Before smartphones, before comment sections, before content creators made their living explaining what your partner's texting habits reveal about their childhood wounds, there were still difficult relationships. There were still nights of uncertainty. There were still moments where a person lay awake wondering if they were loved enough, if they were asking for too much, if the distance they felt was real or imagined. The difference is that the uncertainty had to be lived with, not solved, not categorized, not outsourced. It had to be brought eventually into the relationship itself, or held in a private place until something shifted. And that sitting with uncertainty, which feels unbearable now, which the nervous system resists with the same intensity it would resist physical pain, was actually doing something important. It was keeping the relationship between the two people who were actually in it. Schema therapy, a framework developed to understand the emotional patterns that repeat across a lifetime, describes something called the abandonment schema. This is the deep, often unconscious belief that closeness cannot be trusted to stay, that the people who matter will eventually go. That certainty is temporary, and uncertainty is the real truth. For someone carrying this belief, uncertainty inside a relationship does not feel like a normal part of being human. It feels like early confirmation of what they always feared. And the search for reassurance, the scrolling through relationship content, the texting a friend at midnight asking whether he probably still cares, the reading of every possible interpretation of a single text message, is not foolishness. It is a person with a wound trying to survive a moment that feels much larger than it actually is. The wound is older than this relationship. The wound may be older than this person knows, but the wound found a very modern way to express itself. And here is what the search never tells you. Every piece of relationship content on the internet was written by a person with their own attachment history, their own schemas, their own wounds, their own unfinished grief, their own version of love that they are still figuring out. A person who was cheated on writes that you should never trust unexplained silence. A person who stayed too long in something painful writes that the first sign of avoidance is reason enough to leave. A person who grew up in a chaotic home writes that emotional intensity is love and calm is indifference. A person who suppressed their needs for years writes that asking for anything is strength and accepting less is weakness. These are not universal truths. These are personal truths, shaped by private pain, exported into general advice. And when those personal truths land inside your relationship, they bring their original context with them. They bring someone else's betrayal into your partnership, someone else's fear into your attachment, someone else's unhealed story into a moment that belongs only to you and the person across from you. That is what is being consumed, not wisdom. Someone else's nervous system, wearing the costume of expertise. The cost of this is not always visible. It does not always announce itself. But over time, it accumulates. You stop trusting your own perceptions. You stop trusting his explanations. You stop bringing your confusion to her because you already read what it probably means. You stop asking the simple question because you already know the category it falls into. And the relationship, which began between two real people, begins to happen through a third presence. The internet, always listening, always categorizing, always ready with a framework that fits just well enough to feel true. And slowly, the intimacy that can only exist between two people who are genuinely present with each other. The intimacy that grows not from getting it right but from being honest about getting it wrong begins to thin. Not because the love is gone, because the love is now being filtered through 1,000 voices that were never invited into the room. Many people try to solve this by going to the other extreme. They stop reading about relationships entirely. They delete the apps. They block the accounts. They tell themselves they will simply stop caring what anyone thinks. And for a while, it can feel like relief. But if the impulse that drove the searching, the underlying anxiety, the discomfort with uncertainty, the fear of not being enough, the belief that love must be earned by doing it correctly, if that impulse is still there, untouched, it will simply find another exit. A conversation with a friend that goes 30 minutes too long. A voice note sent at 2 a.m. A subtle interrogation of a partner that does not look like interrogation, only like concern. The internet was never the root. It was the symptom. And treating symptoms without touching the root does not heal anything. It just relocates the wound. The question worth sitting with is not what does the internet say about my relationship. The question worth sitting with is, why is uncertainty inside this relationship so difficult to hold? Because that question belongs to you, not to a comment section, not to a creator with good graphics and a soothing voice, not to the poll at the end of a relationship video asking whether you would stay or go. That question belongs to your body, your history, your particular kind of love, and the specific person in front of you. And the answer, when it comes, will not arrive as a 5-step framework. It will arrive as a feeling that finally has room to be honest. That can happen in therapy. It can happen in a conversation with your partner where you admit that you do not know what you are doing and that you are afraid. It can happen in a quiet morning where you put the phone down and ask yourself, very simply, what is it that I actually need right now? And am I allowed to want it? Relationships have always been ambiguous. They have always contained moments of misunderstanding, repair, distance, and return. They have never come with instructions. And the people who have loved well, who have built something that lasts, did not love well because they followed a framework. They loved well because they stayed present with uncertainty long enough to understand it. They brought their confusion to the relationship instead of taking it to the internet. They asked the person they loved instead of asking the algorithm. And in doing that, they kept something intact that no amount of correct information can replace. The private territory of a love that belongs only to the two people living it. Your relationship does not need an audience. It needs two people who are willing to be confused together. It needs space for the conversation that does not happen after reading a thread. The conversation that happens before. when you are still inside the feeling, when you do not yet know what it means, when the only thing you know is that you care, and it is confusing, and you would like to understand it together. That conversation is where intimacy lives, not in the framework, not in the diagnosis, not in the comment that got 3,000 likes because it described your situation so precisely that it felt like prophecy, in the room, with the person, with the uncertainty still warm in your chest. You do not need the internet to tell you how to love. You need to trust that what you feel is real enough to bring to the person who is actually there. The body knows things the search bar cannot teach it. It knows the difference between a partner who is unavailable and a partner who is tired. It knows the difference between a relationship ending and a relationship asking for something new. It knows, if you stay quiet long enough to listen, what it actually needs. And when it doesn't know, when it is too confused from past wounds and anxiety, your mind does. It might just need the help of silence or therapy to bring its own knowledge to the surface. That is the only advice that was ever going to work. And it was always already inside you, waiting, not for another search, but for a little stillness.